Okay, so the first homework assignment question, and I'll go ahead and link it to you in case you want to look at it too. 3.4.6 is positive, negative, or zero. And so basically what you're doing is you're asking the user to input a whole number, okay? And you want to let them know if the number is positive, negative, or neither, right? Neither meaning it's zero. So we're going to have to use the if, else structure in order to do this. So let's go ahead and start it up. So I want to actually have the assignment here so I can actually write my steps, okay? So since it's a requirement that we're asking the user for input, we will want to create a scanner object. And then we want to prompt the user and store the user's input as an int. All right, so that will give us the data that we need to check. And the data that we need to check is that user's input, that integer. And now we need to actually check some conditions. So this is going to be my conditional block here. So basically, I'm going to do these things. I could just kind of copy and paste this into my comments. So if the number, so I'm going to say the number is positive, print the number is positive. And then if it's negative, I'm going to put in parentheses, this is going to be my else if. If it's negative, print the number is negative. If it's zero, print the number is neither positive nor negative. And I could actually just use an else here as my catch-all. Okay, so I'm going to say this is going to be my if. This is going to be an else if, and this will be my else. Okay, so I don't even have to check to see if it's zero. I just know if it's not positive and it's not negative, I know it has to be zero. Okay, all right. So let's, I think that's all, right? Yeah, nothing else we got to do. Alrighty then. So let's go ahead and create the scanner object. So scanner, input, call the constructor, new scanner. And then whenever we call the scanner's construction, we need to pass in system.in. Cool, got that. Now we need to prompt the user. So we're gonna say, let's see if there's a particular prompt that they want us to use. It doesn't look like it. So we'll just say enter, oops. I'm gonna say enter a whole number because we're wanting to save this as an integer, not as a double. And then we'll go ahead and store it. So int, I'll just call it number. And then remember how we grab something from user input is to reference the scanner object, so input, and then we want the next integer. So we're going to say next int. All right, I think my tabbing is a little off. Yeah, I don't know why. Okay, and okay, so now we're to the interesting part where we're going to talk about the conditional. All right, so if the number is positive, print the number is positive. So that's going to be my if. And how would I check to see if this number was positive? What do I want to write inside of this condition? So what Boolean expression will I want to write inside of these parentheses? Yeah, number is greater than 0. Okay, that means that it's going to be positive, so I'm going to say number is positive. So that means I want to print out this message right here. The number is positive. So I'm going to say system.out.println. The number is positive. Oh, I think those quotes are different, so I need to use normal quotes. Okay, so the number is positive. Okay, so now I need to check a second condition, which means that I need to use an else if. Okay, so here's my second condition I'm going to check, and that second condition is to see if the number is negative. So what Boolean expression would I write here in order to check to see if my number is negative? Yeah, number is less than 0. So if the number is less than 0, I know that the number is negative. And I want to now print that the number is negative. So let me copy this, and I'll just change this to negative. Negative. Okay, so if I get to this point in the code of my if-else structure, to this point, what do I know? If I get to this else clause, I know that it's not positive, and I know that it's not negative. So what must it be? What must the number be if it's not positive or negative? Yeah, it's 0, right? So in that case, we're going to print this special message right here. The number is neither positive nor negative. So we're going to say system.out.print line. And actually, let me put in a comment here. Number is 0. Okay, the only way that we would reach this else block is if the number is 0. All right, so that should do it. Well, let's go ahead and test this out. Okay, so let's test out 0. Okay, so it says the number is neither positive nor negative. That's what we expected. Let's test a positive number. So let's test 1. Number is positive. And let's test -1. Number is negative. Okay. And then we'll check with the test cases. And great. So they just kind of, I think they said that number is negative and that number is positive, which doesn't matter. They were just checking to see if we got the correct keyword here, positive or negative. All right, cool. So any questions on that one? I think this one was fairly straightforward, not too much of a puzzler. I think the next one might be, just in the way that they explained it, might be a little bit different, a little bit difficult. But I did notice that they put kind of the steps in the comments already for the salmon spawn one. Kind of a weird question, right? It's like, why are you talking about salmon spawning seasons? Like that's a relevant topic for teenagers. It's really weird. But I don't know, maybe some of y'all are into salmon and their spawning habits. Might be interesting. All right, so if there's no questions on this one, let's go ahead and move on to salmon spawning. All right, so recall that in this question, this is all about tracking salmon spawning behavior. Some people like to go watch the salmon swim upstream to their favorite spawning places, especially at fish farms. So there's different varieties of salmon. Some of them like to spawn in the spring, some in the fall. And so we want to write a program that will let us know based on the month, which we'll use as a whole number representing the month, whether or not it is spawning season. So we're gonna let the user know if it's spring spawning season, fall spawning season, or just not a spawning season at all. And they give us the different month ranges to use as well. We're going to be using, once again, an if, else if structure. And we'll be using multiple else ifs this time because there's going to be multiple conditions to be checking. And then if we have to remember that if the first statement that evaluates to true, that's going to be the one that the body is, the actual body of code is going to be executed. Okay, so if that first if statement is true, we're not even going to check the rest. So we need to keep that in mind. So that we're checking the months in numerical order and not in kind of like this random order. Okay, there are a bunch of comments in main to help us organize the algorithm, so that's helpful. So let's find out about salmon spawning seasons. All right, so I don't even think I need to have the assignment open because we have all these comments to help us out, which is really nice. So for this one, again, we're going to be using a scanner object, which they've already created for us, so that's good. And what we want to do is we want to prompt the user for the month of the year as an integer. So that's fairly straightforward. We've been doing that for a couple of units now. So we're just going to print out a message, enter a month as an integer. Okay, so they're going to enter a month and then we need to store it. So store the month as an int. So we're going to say int month. And then we're just going to access that scanner object, so input. And we're going to grab the integer that the user just input. So we're going to say next int. Okay, so that starts us off. Now we're in the bulk of the code, the actual algorithm here, where we have to check the month value. And based on the month value, we'll know if it's a spawning season, if it's not a spawning season, a spring spawning season, or a fall spawning season. And we're going to do it in this order, numerically. So we're going to check first the range, the January through February range. And they say that we can just check to see if the month is less than 3, right? Because if the month is less than 3, it's either 1, 2, or 3, which is January. Or sorry, it's either 1 or 2, which is either January or February. So we'll go ahead and do that one. If month is less than 3, then we know it's not a spawning season. So we're gonna just, let's see what we need to do here. Do we print it? Yeah, we're just gonna say not spawning season. So system dot out print line. And I need to replace these quotes. So not spawning season. Okay, now you might be thinking, well, this is not the only case where it's not a spawning season. That's totally fine. We're going to evaluate those as well down here. Okay. So the next condition that we want to evaluate is if the month is less than 7, so less than July. And so since we've already checked this one, we're down here. So if this was false, we know that it's not January or February. So if we're checking to see if it's less than 7, we know that it has to be either March, April, May, or June. Okay, and if that's not clear, let me know and I can explain it a little bit differently. So this, as they say in the comment here, we're going to use an else if. And now we're checking to see if the month is less than 7. So if month is less than 7, then we know that it's going to be a spring spawning season. Okay, so we just copy that. And we're going to say spring spawning season. Okay, we've got a few more conditions, a couple more conditions, and then an else clause. So on the next one, they tell us we need to have an else if to check to see if the month is less than 9. And I'll go ahead and add that, else if month is less than 9. So if these two are false and we're down here checking to see if the month is less than 9, we know that it's not January through June, so it must be July or August. And so we can print out that it's not a spawning season. All right, and then there's one more else if here. For this one, we're going to check to see if the month is less than 12, less than December. And so if all 3 of these are false, we'll reach this else if clause. So we'll know that it's not January through August. And so it must be September, October, or November. So else if month is less than 12, then we know it is September, October, or November, which is a fall spawning season. Okay. Now notice we have an else clause here. Now we've checked to see if it's January through November, and let's say that all of these were false. What's left here is if the month is 12, if it's December. So my else clause here is going to mean, reaching the else clause means that the month is December. And December is not a spawning season, so we're going to go ahead and print that out. All right, and then they have just like a quick note here, because of the way the code is structured, if you enter 2, every single one of these Boolean statements is true, right? Like 2 is less than 12, 2 is less than 9, blah, blah, blah. But it will stop at the first true statement that it encounters, which is why it was so important that we evaluate these in numerical order, right? If we had these switched up, then we could potentially have the wrong message being printed out. Okay, but since we started at months 1 through 2 and then moved on to months, 3 through 6, and so on, we did it in numerical order. This will work the way that it's intended. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it now. So let's check to see, let's put in 12 for December, and that should not be a spawning season. Okay, that's correct. Let's put in a number for spring. So spring is only during March, April, May, or June. So let's go ahead and put in 4 for April. Okay, that's good. And then for fall, it has to be September, October, or November. So let's put in this. Well, actually, it's not November anymore. I'm going to put last month, November, which is 11. And it says fall spawning season. And just for one more check, let's do January to trigger this one right here. So that should be not a spawning season. Awesome. And then let's go ahead and check the code, make sure that all the test cases work. So it tests every single month here, and that works great. Now, you might be wondering, what if the user puts in a negative number or something bigger than 12? Well, we're not controlling for that. If I put 13, right, not spawning season, which I guess is technically correct. There's no month 12, and so it's technically not spawning season. And if I put a negative, same thing. But notice that we're not controlling for the user's input, and that's not something that we normally do in this class. We kind of pretend like the user's always going to be well-behaved and do what we expect, which is not what happens in reality. But when you take future computer science classes, you'll learn how to control for user error as well. But for this problem, I hope that this logic made sense. I thought it was very helpful that they already had the comments in there for you to tell you exactly what to do. All right, so let me know if you have any questions. If you don't feel comfortable doing that in the chat, you can private message me, or you can always send me a message on Jupyter and I can answer your questions. So at this point, let me actually stop recording.